Welcome, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music, my first ever review. What am I reviewing today? This is Thrill by Native Instruments, the people behind it. Galaxy Instruments, I believe. They're responsible for Una Corda, a lot of the other pianos, Rise and Hit, which is another sample library that I absolutely loved. And I'm reviewing this today, and going forward, I want to explain sort of my thinking behind reviews, how I'm going to categorize and sort of sort through things and explain the value of these products. So I'm going to be ranking this and future products based on a number of parameters. Versatility, tweakability, ease of use, sound, and finally, cost. Now, at the very end of the review, I'm not going to do a pros and cons. I'm just going to do a cons because I feel like that's what's kind of lacking in the communities. A lot of people like me sometimes get NFRs and they're sort of afraid to say anything that might be, valuable criticism because they won't get NFRs anymore. So I'm just sort of going to give my feedback as someone who paid for this, as I did, and what I think might be missing. And that's going to be going forward. I'm going to sing the praises of these libraries, but I'm also going to be talking about at the very end sort of the things that might be lacking or I'd like to see in a future iteration of whatever particular product. So the first parameter here is sound. This just gets a 5 right away. This is a beautiful library. The people at Galaxy Instruments have captured some incredible sound sources. We have 2 per side, 2 per thrill. And just to give you an example here, I'll choose, things are divided, by the way, between atmospheres and clusters. I'll choose one here, noisy scrape, and let's just sort of play around with the XY pad. Have a listen. This is what this library sounds like. It's very responsive, and it decays in a very natural sort of way, which I enjoy. Flutter and tremolo again from the clusters patch. Go to some atmospheres really quickly here. Let's go for a clusterized rush, my apologies. It's pretty much every time I go to the New York Times website and I see Trump on the headlines, this is the sort of soundtrack to my thinking. And very true to sort of Native Instrument stuff and Galaxy Instruments, very German companies. I just have this voice like Werner Herzog in the back of my head. Just, I'm very anxious at the news of Trump. Sort of filling me with anxiety. So much so I'm getting thrills in the back of my spine. And this foreboding music sort of creeps in. It's full of anxiety. Moving on. I don't want to be disrespectful to the Germans. Now, so sound, this is gorgeous. It's beautiful. And sound can be further manipulated, which brings me to the next sort of parameter of the review, which is tweakability. This gets a 5 as well. I'm not a generous reviewer. If you've seen my other reviews, you'll know that these are hard-earned numbers, people. No, my first one. What am I talking about? 5. Why? On the left and the right, we can attack a number of parameters here. Pitch, volume, the mic mix, when the samples release. For the clusters patch, we can, affect a voicing tree here. If we hit Alt, we can switch this around. See this sort of switch as I move things around here. The cluster voice tune. Go like this back and forth. Change the voicing, change the spread, change the width of these clusters. Six voices doing really cool stuff. So I can put my hand down. Watch here on the lowest C. I can put a number. we can get, you know, polyphony here. If I go back to this little sort of menu here, I can change the mic mix. I can go to an effects page. Affect things even further. One of my favorite presets to play with here for this is the ambient scream one. Now watch what happens when I turn mutate on. And this just gives me a sort of, I think, a convolution, reverb, and impulse response, I believe. If I turn mutate off, that sounds all very fine, but let me turn this comb space on. I mean, now we're in sort of digital Transformers, Michael Bay territory here with just this gorgeous sort of phasey sound. Phase or stereo, turn all of these on, go through the presets. This is how tweakable this thing is here. And haven't even mentioned, you know, the fact that we can change the dynamics here on each side for each thrill, quote unquote, for the sound sources. So we can decide how loud they go. We can EQ them respectively right up here. And here's our convolution reverb, our spaces. We can decide how much we want to send, whether we want to tether these effects to both sides for a nice ping pong effect via this link chain here. I mean, it's very, very, very tweakable and extremely impressive. And of course, we have sort of the master tab here where we can affect the EQ sort of on like, you know, the stereo output sort of side. So this is the sum of both thrills, affect the saturation, the dynamics, the equalizer, the curve, sort of the intensity with which we get, you know, we go from the softest sound to the most intense sound. You can see right there. If we want to change, obviously, the sound source, it's very easy to do it here. We see on the bottom left, you know, if I'm clicking too fast, I'm sorry here. I did this all in the overview. If I click ambient crunch atmosphere, I'm on the left side, the left thrill. So we have two sound sources, obviously. You know, I can decide which slot I want to enter new sort of instruments into. And this reminds me a lot of Absinthe or any sort of other, you know, big sampler where we can choose the category, the character, and then we find a preset that's adequate for our needs, whatever they happen to be. But the bottom line here, as far as tweakability goes, yes, this is extremely tweakable. This is not one of those sort of walled gardens where we have to play within the confines of what Thrill has given us. We take their samples and we can mangle and tweak them, detune them, all kinds of stuff. And forgive me, Galaxy Instruments and Native Instruments, if I'm forgetting to shout out to a number of things I've already forgotten, and now we're right here. So we have a number of tools here. We can tune on the atmosphere side, the pitch. Bring this over a bit more. Right. So I'm tuning ambient noise 1. I know I don't want to change that. Go back here and tune the crushed screams. In fact, I'll just turn this off so we can get some context. Right? And the spread, this just adds additional voices to make a more lush sort of sound. Choose odd 2 voice here and have a nice sort of blend knob here. Before, after we introduce the spread. And what I really like is the visualization. So, for example, I can turn this back on here, and now we have our crossfade. So, you know, what does this mean? Basically, as I'm creeping up the other side of the XY pad on the left here, we're going to get a lot of this sound, the crush scream sound. But when I bring it past a certain point, probably, I don't know what this is, 50% here on the XY pad, the ambient noise 1 is going to be introduced. So listen, we're only going to get the right side, the crush scream side here. I'll turn these off just so I don't mess it up. And as I bring this up, we're slowly going to get some of the ambient noise 1 sounds. This, I believe, is the other way around, so we'll get ambient noise, and then slowly the crush screams will come in. There we have that. Or we can crossfade, right? We can choose to have certain sounds tail off. So all ambient noise 1 on the left, and as I go up the y-axis, crush screams come in. So the higher up I go, the more the sound of the crush screams. I feel like I'm talking to my therapist. Anyway, so tweakability 5, okay? Sound 5, tweakability 5. Next up, ease of use. This gets a 5 too. I know this is sounding like it's just, free for all or whatever, but I want to say, Galaxy, if you're listening, to me this is extremely important. This is an extremely playable instrument, but I just want to say, if there's a lot of composers out there who have disabilities, whether it's hearing or visual, or maybe it's an invisible disability, who have a hard time doing polyphonic stuff and multiple voicing stuff. I think that this is a step in the right direction. I think this is an extremely, as we say here in the West, accessible instrument. So you could see someone who has difficulty, whether it comes to just weakness or dexterity or whatever, being able to really make some really cool stuff in here. So I congratulate you for making a very accessible, what do I want to say here, disability-friendly library. This is really great. So thank you. I've worked with a lot of people in the past before I became a composer. So that's sort of always on my mind is there a barrier to entry as far as playability goes? So this is a super easy to play library. Basically, I'm holding down a key and now moving around on the XY pad, switching between thrills. I turn them off over here. If we go back, it really doesn't get any easier than that. So this is a very playable library, very easy to use. It's sort of a no-brainer. In fact, if you gave this library to someone, I bet, and just put them in front of a MIDI keyboard they'd never seen, sort of software before like this, I'm sure they could easily get sounds out right away and be very satisfied and happy. So very accessible from a disability perspective, which I don't want to keep going over, but just from a, if someone with a pedestrian knowledge of sample libraries and tones and sounds or whatever, anyone can get into this. Very accessible, very universally playable. So thank you. This is wonderful. Totally great step in the right direction. Next up, versatility. Now, I have some reservations about this library, but it's sort of a tricky thing. And I would give this library a score out of versatility, probably a 4 out of 5. And the reason for that is this has a very specific intended use. This library is very clearly focused on people who are scoring for sort of ambient thrill horror genre type stuff, whether it's in the video game domain or live installations. Although, if you use this for a live installation thing, I don't see how it could be anything but a very, not negative, like, oh, it sucks, but like a negative, dark sort of, live installation thing. You can't really do a lot of bright, happy stuff with this library. Although in the marketing and in the manual, you can use this for live installations. And I've seen a lot of live audio oral installation stuff, and not all of it is very dark. But that being said, this library is really meant for people scoring stuff with a very sort of dark, gritty tone, dark, gritty worlds. You can't really port this out and make a happier version of it without, I guess you could pitch stuff around or maybe mess with stuff, but right out of the box, this library is very clearly, from the UI to everything, the color scheme, this is meant for scary stuff. And that isn't to say that you can't use it on orchestral stuff that is maybe a little bit more melodic than scary. In fact, in my first look video, I paired it with sort of a sad, sort of sullen, melancholic piece that I wrote, and it worked quite well, according to me. I really liked it. So, but that's what doesn't get this score a 3 or a 2 out of 5. That's why it's sort of more 4 out of 5, because it's very good at what it's meant to do, but I can't see a lot of people using this outside of applications, which the marketing team and the team behind this product really intended this product for. Thrill is not supposed to be anything but a super dark, scary, thrilling, moody sample library. So, which brings me to the last thing, which is cost. I would give this library maybe a 3.8 out of 5, maybe a 4 out of 5, maybe 3.5. I'll pick one. split the difference. Let's say 3.8 out of 5. Why do I say that? This is expensive. And while it's very tweakable and you can play with the voicings, you can play with the tuning, and you can tweak it till, tweak the snot out of it, compress it, EQ it, or whatever, you're still using their samples. So you're coming up and having to sort of play within their system. And even though there's, a whole bunch of sound sources and they're all beautifully and meticulously recorded, we can't bring our own samples in to this. For example, with Spectrasonics' Omnisphere 2, a huge power synth, you can bring your own samples in. And that runs for, I think, about $4.99 American. This is $2.99 American. But if you're Canadian, that runs you at about $400 after the dollar. And a lot of people that watch the channel are Canadian. And the economy is in the toilet right now for pretty much the entire world. So this is not cheap. And I think, yes, we can tweak and all that stuff, but I really would have liked to have seen applications for this library that were a little bit more bright. And I would have liked to have seen the ability to bring in your own samples. And for that reason, because you have to sort of work within the system of Thrill, and also because there's a lot of libraries out there which are not libraries and as playable as this, mind you. But you can sort of just, find moody pieces and just look at the moment in let's say you're doing a film or whatever. Even though we can't play in the XY pad, we can just drag in, see where the crest is on the wave pattern, and line that up very easily and visually with, some pre-baked loop or something that comes from one of the Loop Master Sample Magic, well, not really Sample Magic, Sample Phonics or something like that, library companies. Whereas this is definitely more playable, and don't get me wrong, this is super playable. That's why 5, ease of use, playability, awesome. Tweakability, this is definitely there. I mean, one of the things I wanted to say that I kind of forgot to say was in the marketing for this, they say you can use it in live installations and also in theater. And that is absolutely true. And I really want to commend Galaxy Instruments, because when I was trying to use this, when I was actually doing live theater stuff, and I had my push and I had a bunch of samples and all that stuff, and you have to really time it. And it would have been a lot of fun if I was back doing that moody. It was a French play, and there was some darkness and some creepiness and all the rest. There's one scene with a haunted house, and I thought, how fun would it have been if I had Thrill then, and I just had, my mouse or whatever, and I could see the characters moving, the actors on stage, and just, whatever. So when you see stuff like that in the marketing, some people might roll their eyes and be like, yeah, live theater, but no, this really has applications for theater and for stage plays and all the rest of it. Absolutely, it's great. But I think this is a very expensive instrument, and I think that for some people that will be a sort of barrier to entry. So, but on the whole, extremely satisfying experience, very easy to use. So let's just get to the thorns. Okay, so I've already sort of mentioned the thorns and the cost. That was sort of an entry into this conversation. So the thorns would be, can't upload your own samples, which you can do with more expensive, synths. Like, for example, Spectrasonics' Omnisphere 2, we can upload our stuff, and there's a lot of tweakability in that. We can really customize things, go deep and rabbit hole from a sound design perspective. So for us not to be able to do this is it's a little frustrating, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that I know a lot of us have lying around that we would love to put into this. This is, after all, it's in the marketing and in the manual, sort of a playback engine, right? So it'd be really cool to put to use some of the crossfading stuff, the effects stuff, and all that, pitch and all that stuff, and use it with our own samples. That'd be really cool. We can't do that. It's very expensive to me, maybe not to a lot of people, but to me, this is expensive. The other thing is, this is not, you can't really do a lot with this outside of the thrill horror genre. In fact, thrill is almost a bit of a misnomer, and I mean that in the least offensive way possible. But thrill sometimes connotes, like it's thrilling, it's exciting or whatever, whereas this is more like menacing or dark, or, this is kind of scary. And I can almost see them doing a sort of like action strings, whereas that's the dark side and that's the thrill, and then maybe down the road they'll do like an emotive strings version of thrill, where it's like, I don't know, shrill or something. That'd be a terrible name for it, but just like, flowery and la 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 or whatever, because like this could be a really cool tool if we're doing more sort of naturey, optimistic sort of stuff. So yeah, this is it. But I mean, the marketing, the beautiful video that they shot, I have it on good authority that they shot it in like a bike locker in Germany in the Native Instruments building. There's a Manchester Music exclusive for you. It's all directed at scary video game, horror movie, TV scoring, and it totally works for that, but bit of a walled garden. The last thing I want to say is, in the manual, guys, you really should include a how-to for every DAW out there. How to use, Thrill in Pro Tools, Thrill in Live, Thrill in Logic, Thrill in, I don't know, Sonar, Thrill in Studio One, whatever, because I have a lot of people coming to me asking me, how the hell do you record the MIDI? How do you record passages here? And it's not as straightforward as pressing record and using another sample library with keys or strings or whatever, because you have to actually access the the automation and go into like a write mode or something like that. So I think that, and I bet maybe you guys and Native Instruments have gotten a number of comments and questions on like, how the heck do I record? I know how to make it, but like I press record and I whatever. So that would have been really, really nice to have, just a how-to for people in the various DAWs, because everyone's using a different DAW now. So in the manual, it would have been nice to have that all sort of sectioned out there, because a lot of people asked me on the channel, a few people asked me in the YouTube comment section for the first look video that I did how to do this. So I think that should be going forward, just a nice little sort of throwing some red meat to the people that use those DAWs, and just making it sort of easy and more approachable for them to use this product, as opposed to they're playing with it and they're like, oh crap, I don't know how to record, and then they end up spending a couple hours online in forums and all the rest of it, and that's not fun. So, but at the end of the day, this is a brilliant library. I really enjoyed it. Oh my gosh, this review went on so long. I turned off my air conditioning and closed all the windows so that we don't have any sound. I'm sweating like a pig. So without further ado, this concludes the first sample library review that I've done. Hopefully I'll do more on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Thrill, Native Instruments, Galaxy Instruments. You did some incredible work.